Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. We're picking up where we left off with the last episode and starting to work our way through the key quests in Village Low Rank 4-star. So, a few things really fast. This one ended up being quite the recording because I was setting out to make this both 4 and 5-star. Turns out that's about 6 hours of unedited footage. And in order to actually make these videos even somewhat reasonably length, I'm going to have to split this in two. So you'll see whether I've decided to do episode 2, part 1, or go ahead and say episode 2, then episode 3. You'll find out I'm not 100% set on that just yet, but I'll decide by the time we're done recording. Either way, we're going to go all the way through the Lagiacrus hunt in this one, and I'll give a couple tips for the different quests along the way in that. And otherwise, we'll just kick back and enjoy the journey. So one thing that I'm remembering now, like playing back through this, is that in the more modern games, it's really, really fast to burn your way through low rank. Like they really do start sort of treating low rank as the primary means of delivering a sort of tutorial. That wasn't quite so true back at this point in time. The quest still took a minute. They're not hard. Like most of these only take 10 to 15 minutes to beat, with one exception or two here and there. But they definitely take a lot more prep work and a little bit more time than what the typical low rank fight takes in things like Wilds or World, or even Sunbreak to a degree. I would say the time frame for low rank quests really started dropping off in World. And that maybe Generations and Generations Ultimate was sort of that transition period, but Generations Ultimate still had really long hub quests, just not so much for the village. But right now, we're going in to go fight Lagombi. Not a terribly difficult fight, but one of the first ones where we actually need to use hot drinks. Now, keep in mind, low rank, you get ample supplies in that supply box at the beginning. Enough stuff to really be able to do most of the quest other than bringing in a couple extra health potions. But realistically, things like hot drinks and whatnot, normally you get just enough to do. Lagombi here is kind of like a slightly harder version of Azeros, where Azeros only really swipes at you and sits down. Lagombi has a couple other hits, but otherwise the Snow Bunny's really not a terribly difficult fight. He's kind of a cool little creature when he pops up. The things that you can break on him are the normal suspects, like you can break claws, you can break his ears, and where he has such big ears, he's also susceptible to sonic bombs. Although, from what I recall, there's not really a whole lot of times to use them that it's actually useful to do so. So, see, there's his forward swipes and whatnot. We're really only waiting around to see a couple unique things from him that Azeros doesn't do. That being one of them. He does little slides that'll reposition him kind of quickly, and he chains them together in low rank, not really super fast from hit to hit, but when you get to high rank or when he's enraged, he'll actually chain those slides together really, really fast. Now, I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think if you have his claws broken, it actually makes him lose a little bit of control when he's doing the slides. And so that can kind of keep him slowed down. Like, we'll fight Barrioth in the next video, but Barrioth very much has that going on. But yeah, his little slides, those twirl attacks, those are the only things that are really unique about this. So we're ready to kind of clip this one and move on to the next ones. I'm not going to have the intro fights be shown in their entirety. We're just going to show enough to give a few tips and then skip ahead, show the ending, and talk about the next quest. So here we are getting ready to take him out. You can see his ears are broken. And if you look at the timer in the upper left, which it's slightly cut off, I'm sorry for the inconsistent positioning of the screen. It's the thing that I'm using to record this. I'm recording through OBS, and it doesn't start in a consistent place. So every time I actually stretch the screen out so that it looks bigger on my monitor, it kind of changes the position in OBS. So you'll see the position sort of shake around a little bit. Always remember, in these games, whenever you finish doing your kill and you get your carbs, run around and try to gather as many resources as you can. So you'll quickly learn where all the resources are on these maps. That way you know exactly what spots you need to go to pick stuff up. And this is reminding me that finding Bloodstones is actually not that hard. And that will actually come in handy here shortly. All right. Now, we're going to take a small diversion and not necessarily do a key quest. We're going in to kill Wroggi. And the reason being, there's some items that I needed off of him to do an upgrade. But I figured since he's a new monster, anytime I'm doing a new one, even if it is just to farm materials, because there's a couple points like material farming and whatnot I don't show in here, I figured we would jump in and actually give some tips on it. Now, the thing is with Wroggi, you really don't have to give that many tips. He's not that different from Jaggy, like a Great Jaggy. If you didn't have trouble with the Great Jaggy, you're not going to have trouble with him. But getting into the fight, the little cinematic here actually shows you the exact thing that's the difference between him and Jaggy. Otherwise, he has the exact same attacks, and that's that little poison cloud. So he can poison you, and it makes him kind of irritating at times to deal with. Because anything that poisons you in this game, you just find that you can't carry nearly enough antidotes to consistently deal with poison. But Great Wroggi is really not that hard of a fight to deal with. Now, when you go into G rank, he starts running around like he's on some sort of amphetamines, but outside of G rank, he's really not that bad. The only really big difference is instead of busting his frill, you'll bust the little poison sac on his throat. But otherwise, literally the same moves. Yet again, the only actual difference being that he'll get away from you and try to spit a poison cloud at you that will actually inflict poison. But otherwise, pretty much the same attacks. He's got the tail whip. He's got the little claw things. He can dash forward at you. He can do a hip check. And then he vomits and screams at you. So we'll go ahead and jump to the end of the fight and get our carbs and move on. Always remember to crouch when you're carving so that you can actually get your carves done faster. It doesn't really matter for these lower rank creatures, but it will come in handy when we start encountering things that have more than 3 carves. So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to do the Bloodstone delivery key quest. If you actually look at the list of key quests available for this particular rank that you have to do, there's several that you can do, but you only have to do 2 of them, and the ones that you can choose from are Hunt a Baroth and a Great Jaggy, Lagombi, Great Baggy, regular Baggy, and Deliver Bloodstones. Now, I did the Lagombi mainly because he's kind of this was a newer creature for this game. And we're doing the Bloodstones for a specific reason. Sometimes it's good to work in the optional quests that are to go gather things and deliver them because it lets you basically do a gathering run and knock out a quest at the same time. I need light crystals for some sort of upgrade. You get light crystals in this cold zone, so while I am farming up bloodstones, I can also farm up light crystals. So occasionally when you're looking at these key quest lists, it's a good idea to do the ones that are delivery quests. They're boring. They don't really enrich your day at all to do them, but they help you build up those supplies and knock out a key quest at the same time. Because one of the things I'm severely lacking on this playthrough is actually going through and mining up resources. Like, I'm going to have to spend some time at some point going through and farming up Moga to actually generate some points so I can keep my farm going. Because I'm kind of trying to just blaze through key quests. Now, granted, I'm getting ready to shift up the video format a little bit, and we're going to start doing just 1 video per rank, because trying to squeeze these 2 into this one, where now I'm starting to get to where there's a decent number of actual creatures to hunt, it's making the videos a little bit longer. And I don't think that a 3-hour video once a week is going to do super well on the channel. So instead, we're going to try to get them split up to be roughly an hour or less. This one's going to be, I think, a little bit longer than that. But we're just going to stick to 1 rank per video from this point out. So, anyway, work in some gathering quests as you're working your way up through your village quests. Or, if it's your first time through, to be honest with you, just do all of them. If you want to ultimately open up the quest that lets you get rainbow pigments, you're going to have to do all of them anyway. So you might as well do them all as you go. It saves you a little bit of time backtracking later on, and there's no harm in it. because I am skipping a whole bunch of weapon upgrades because I have a plan to basically try to take advantage of slime weapons to reduce my need to actually farm out other weapons. And by the time I get to the point where I really need to be getting multiple tiers of elemental weapons, I'll be high enough up that going back and farming high rank and low rank to get the parts to make the initial weapons will be super easy. I don't know why the frame rate's being so choppy right there. It wasn't doing that when I was actually playing it, but whatever. I guess sometimes things aren't going to go as well as you would hope. Anyway, the G rank weapons, even just the base level ones, are so strong that you can take what was a 15 or 20 minute quest before and it drops it down to 10 or 5 minutes. So yet again, farming up low rank and high rank monster parts super fast once you get to that point. As a matter of fact, once I finish up village low rank, I'm actually going to take a minute to try to unlock high rank in the village and grab some Lagiacrus parts to upgrade my armor and weapons. Anyway, moving on. Time to do the Lagiacrus urgent, or at least the initial one. The first one is just to repel him. And I mess up kind of here at the beginning and try to run off and act like I'm going into the water. But the first time you fight him, he actually starts out inland. And you're just kind of driving him back into the ocean. So he's not nowhere near where I'm getting ready to head to. Also, that little entry map point that I did just now is not actually marked on the map. There's actually quite a few shortcuts like that in the older Monster Hunter games where some of the shortcuts are on the map, a good chunk of them are not on the map. But once you learn them, they actually can cut a whole lot of time out getting from one side of the map to the other. It'd been so long since I played this, I forgot that at this point, you're not trying to fight him in the ocean. If you actually read what the village elder says, he straight up tells you, hey, we've seen him on the beach. Could you go get him to go back in the water? And so that gives you a tip to actually go through Area 2 and pop up in Area 5. Although you can go to 9 like I did and just go backwards. Either way, it doesn't take but a second to get there if you actually pay attention to what you're doing. One of my big mistakes is thinking to myself that I needed to just blaze through that village elder stuff as quickly as possible. I actually kind of started slowing down after this to sort of double check what the last few things are that he says to be sure I'm not missing out on anything important. Anyway, I'll pick back up whenever the fight actually starts. Alright, so if you actually go in the right way, you'll see him asleep on the beach. Now, one interesting thing to note is a lot of the appearance of this particular Lagiacrus is of one that's already injured. Like, a lot of those markings and stuff that are on him are the way that he appears as you sort of break parts. So the implication is that this is a slightly weakened Lagiacrus, which is fine because they're kind of giving you a bit of training on a harder level monster. He's the first really serious sort of threat that you actually face in the game at this point. Nothing else is really going to put up a challenge by now. Now, granted, I should have just pulled out my lance right there and blocked the roar. But the parts on him that can be broken, the horns, the claws, both front and back, the tail, and those little horns on his back as well as his chest. If you can manage to break his back, it actually affects his ability to consistently do his big body shock attacks. But it's a little tricky to break it because there's no way to mount in this game, and getting topples requires breaking the claws. In general, with Lagiacrus, you're not going to break every single part unless you're just super methodical. He's one of those monsters that his parts are, in some, strong enough that unless you're very, very careful, you're going to end up killing him before you break everything, which is not a terrible thing. It just makes you have to be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of what you're actually targeting. His attacks overall are pretty simple. He does the slither forward that you tend to see with creatures that are long like him. He'll do the thing where he lifts himself up and slams himself down. A lot of these attacks will look pretty familiar from Ludroth. Even the lightning ball is very similar to the little water spit thing that Royal Ludroth does. So it's not that these are actually different attacks, and this is one of these things that with older monster hunters you'll start to notice if you really pay attention. The rigging style of the body basically tells you what their attack style is going to be like. So this guy is what's called a Leviathan, so he has Leviathan style attacks, which are the wriggles, the up and down, tail whip, which he doesn't do like a circular tail whip, and then shoulder check is on almost everything for some god-awful reason. Alright, so let's actually talk about what to look for some of his attacks, because he hasn't really done it yet. But when you see him start to kind of curl up like a cat curling itself up into a ball, you need to get away from his body, because what he's getting ready to do is release a big pulse of electricity. The truth is with Lagiacrus, when he's on dry land, which I know there's water on screen right now, but when he's not actually swimming around, he's really not that hard. That's the reason why he's one of the few monsters with the subspecies that's actually easier than the regular version. There's a variant of him called Ivory Lagiacrus. Sorry for slurring that one together. But it pretty much only fights you on land, and it is significantly easier than this version of him because he actually goes in the water. Now, this specific fight, you win when he goes in the water. So there's no real worry with that. You're just trying to beat down on him enough to get him to actually run away. And the first sign that you're doing enough damage is when he runs to zone 9 from here. Like, he'll actually start moving zones through. And this is also a consistent thing with a lot of other monsters in these earlier games. They have a set pattern for how they move around. There's certain zones that they will go to no matter how their health is. But there are a sequence of zones that they'll go through whenever they're going towards the zone where they try to go to sleep to recover health. And that's a good signal that you're actually well on your way towards winning the fight when they start progressing their way through a different set of zones. Now, all this is actually known information, and if you really want to do your homework, you can look it up and actually look up the series of zones that they will fight you in. This is something people used to take note of in the older games because, remember, we had to paintball them every time to actually see where they're at. And since they only go to certain zones, if you can't find them, you can actually look that up and see, say, where they tend to start at on any particular map, because any monster that appears in multiple maps, we usually have one specific zone that it actually starts in. And not only do they have set places that they start in, for quests like this, they have set zones that they're in the first time. Like, no, let's say I triple carded on this quest somehow. When I come back in, he will probably be in zone 5 as his starting point, because the whole sequence of this quest is pretty locked in place. It's 5 to 9 to 10, you win. But that's not the way it always is. Some of them, after you get that initial introduction cinematic, it will actually start them in their normal spawn places. So looking that up can be quite useful and actually save you a little bit of time once you've really gotten into the game a bit. Now, is it absolutely necessary? No. You can actually make an item called a Psycho Serum, and if you pop that, it'll show you where the monster is at any given point in time. They don't last super long, but they'll get you there. Now, see, this did enough damage. As soon as it did the damage to cause him to go ahead and start running away, I won. So I didn't even have to fight him in Zone 10 at all. I don't even know if I really would need to fight him in Zone 10, but he ran out there anyway. And if you go out here and actually watch, you can see him jump in, and you can actually watch his dot slowly swim off into the distance and leave the map area. But that's it for this one, so let's jump ahead to the next quest. Alright, so really fast, I need to do a harvest tour in the desert to go grab a cactus flower to use to actually install the honey box. Normally, I wouldn't include harvest tours, but I wanted to be sure you understand the way these work. You can grab a map at the beginning, and then you just run out, start gathering the items you want, and after I think it's 2 minutes, you get a notification that additional supplies have been delivered. And once those additional supplies have been delivered, you can pick up what's called a Pal Pass ticket. And then you turn around, walk over to the red box. It's over here. Now, the Veggie Elder, you can, anytime you see him, just pester him a couple times. He'll give you a bunch of free items. But go over to the red box, hit it, delivers the Pal Pass ticket, and any other sort of account items that you picked up. and ends the Harvestor. When I first started playing, it actually took me a minute to figure that out. I had no idea how to get back out of areas in Harvestor, so I had my bags maxed out. I'd killed all sorts of stuff, and I was just kind of sitting around waiting for time out. But that's all you have to do. Go back to the blue box, pick out the Paw Pass ticket, turn around, turn it in at the box, and you're good to go. Yet again, I think the timer on it's 2 minutes. Not terrible. Now, next up is actually a quest. So we need to do Rathian, and this one you don't have an option for. You have to do the Rathian quest in order to actually unlock the final Lagiacrus quest before you move on into 5-star. So Rathian, though, or Rathian, however you want to say it. I'm pretty sure it's Rathian because the red one's Rathalos, but I'd call it a Rathian back in the day, and that's still how I do it. It's kind of like the Titus thing. Whatever. Doesn't really matter all that much. This is one of my favorite fights. Just baseline Rathian, baseline Rathalos. They're classics. She's actually one of the first big monsters I ever fought in the game. Way back, because the first game that I had picked up, I think, was Freedom Unite on the PSP. I didn't have an easy time with that one. I actually ended up abandoning it, but I do remember specifically getting to a point where she was harassing me. I went back and played it a little bit since then, and I was able to beat her, but it was an interesting experience at the time. Ever since then, it's actually gotten to where I've killed her and her husband so much that they aren't really that big a challenge anymore. They're actually two of the monsters that I'm the most familiar with out of the whole series. And I will go ahead and say, I will not be doing silver and gold. I might kill gold Rathalos, or gold Rathian and silver Rathalos individually. I am absolutely not going to do the combo quest unless I just feel like I absolutely have to, because that is one of the hardest quests in any Monster Hunter game that I've ever played. Not only are those two incredibly difficult to actually even get a weapon that will consistently do damage to them because their skin's so hard, they're just super aggressive. Like, hold on a sec. Sorry, I couldn't remember if they were actually in World or not. They weren't as bad in World, now that I remember them being in it. They were horrible in this game. I would 100% say they're the hardest fight in it. There's other fights that are notorious for being a bit of a challenge, but there's sort of techniques for going through it. Silver Rathalos and Gold Rathian are just nightmarishly annoying. It's not even so much that they're hard in a way that feels fair. They're hard in a way that feels unfair. But regular Rathian, not so bad. She does some charges, which is what she's sort of known for, running back and forth. Like, there's actually memes and stuff about that she just runs around so much she's irritating. She'll do her little thing where she lines up like that, flips up in the air, tries to hit you with the tail and give you poison. What she actually does is give you a really good opportunity to get some hits into that tail. And if you do manage to get that tail cut off, you severely weaken the range on that attack. She can still hit you and can still poison you, but that's the best way to go about it. If you just want to kill her quickly, the head is what you aim for. Break the head and then just keep pounding on it. It's not that hard to get the break, and once you get the break, you can kind of keep going. Now, one thing I would recommend doing is breaking her wings, because that's how you're going to get Wrath Talons, and you actually need them later on to be able to complete a delivery to unlock the Sedeus fight. So you should actually actively be trying to break her wings, which is a little tricky because you don't get a whole lot of opportunities to hit them well unless you can actually hit up high. So longsword, greatsword, lance is actually not terrible for it. Gun lance, and well, any of the ranged options will probably not have a hard time hitting it. Sword and shield, dual blades, hammer. Is hunting horn in this game? Can't remember. I don't ever really play it, so I can't remember if it's in this one or not. And that's about it. They're not going to be the best options for this because they don't really have great ways to take her wings out. But if you have any of the other things that I mentioned, then you won't have too terrible of a time actually hitting the wings. And if you angle yourself just right, hitting them is really not terrible. You can actually hit at that little spot where her wings join up with the body and it counts as a wing hit. But if you're just slightly off, you'll hit the body, and you'll see a lot of that with this stuff, where sometimes the best way to actually get the hits in is to just angle at a place where they join. Like, say, with Baroth and Uragon, the easiest way to get the tail cuts is actually to hit the point where the tail joins up with the main body, because it's a little bit easier to reach. Now, let's really quickly mention a few things about her besides the tail spin. She also has fireball pulses. It'll either be straight forward or it'll be 3, one to the right, one to the left, and one in the middle. Although she starts, I think, goes middle, right, left, I think is the order. But other than that, there's not really that much to this fight that's difficult. If you watch it one good time, you see this whole thing with it. The tail spin, best thing to do as far as the way she spins is her head leads in a clockwise direction, I believe. So if you're hugging her right hand side, then the initial spin will miss you, and you can either block the next one or try to get kind of up underneath her and move around and not worry about the second half of it. But she only does it a half at a time. Yeah, she's doing clockwise, and I'm pretty sure that's the direction she does it every time. I don't think she spins the directions around. So if you hug her right, your left, you're generally pretty safe from the tail spin. But yeah, see, like, it still hits even if the tail's actually cut off. So you got to remember that just because it's cut off doesn't mean that it doesn't hit. It does knock the range back a little bit. But the beautiful thing with these older games is you still have phantom hitboxes. So things hit at a bit of a range that you won't expect them to hit at. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the tips for this fight. So let's go ahead and jump ahead and wrap up this first part. All right. So we're going into the final 4-star urgent to actually kill the Lagiacrus. Now, unfortunately, this one is set up to sort of be the opposite of what the last one was. Where the last one primarily took place on land, this one's going to primarily take place in water. And you'll probably pretty quickly realize why people actually wanted water combat to go away. I do think they could probably do a better job with it now. The little preview section where you actually fight Lagiacrus in the water and wilds showed that it felt a little bit better, but I still wasn't super satisfied with it. I think it's, I would love to see them fix it up, because my whole goal with this playthrough is actually to get to Dire Morales and, or not Dire Morales. Yeah, no, Dire Morales. Sorry, I was mixing him up with something else for a second, but yeah, get to Dire Morales and kill him. Other than him, I actually want to fight, Jin Moran again, and Hallowed Jin. I want to try to give it a shot to see if I can do it solo. The timing on it's a little tight, so that may or may not be doable in this particular run, but we'll see. But underwater fights, not the absolute best. They're not as bad as people claim they were, but there's a little bit of nostalgia going on where people really more miss the creatures than they do underwater. And I was the same sort of victim to that. Like, I will fully admit right now, in my head, I'd be like, oh, water wasn't that bad. Going back through and doing this playthrough, I'm like, yeah, water kind of was. It's not that it's bad. It's just that you don't have as good a controls in the water. Like, where it switches from being a flat plane to a 360, or, well, omnidirectional, the control is just not as good. Now, they have been working for a while with things like Insect Glaive and whatnot to actually give omnidirectional controls. So they very well could actually do underwater combat a little bit better than what they did up until this point. So we'll see. Also, by this point, I'm actually starting to think maybe I was a little bit jumping the gun saying that I need to split this into 2 episodes. Because now that I've been editing a bit, this is actually down a little bit low. We'll see. We'll see. You'll see, ultimately, whether this is split up in 2 or not. If this is the end of the episode after the Lagiacrus fight, then the part 2 will be up tomorrow, or you won't be hearing this part because I went back in and muted it. All right, so he managed to get a good hit on me on that one. That was purely my fault. That was bad playing. It wasn't anything to do with him being particularly hard. I just wasn't paying enough attention to my health, and I let him beat me down enough that it killed me. Unfortunately, that means I lost pretty much all the advantages I had from my food buffs and whatnot. But really, at this point, I'm not going through and doing things like Demon Drug and Armor Skin and all that sort of stuff, so it's not like I'm out much. It doesn't take but a second to get back to him. But just being slightly more careful, and this isn't that bad. The underwater combat, the tricky part about it is dodging is harder. Because, like, okay, with the lance, you already sort of dodge in a reverse direction, depending on what you're doing. Like, if you just let go of everything and you hit the dodge button, you dodge backwards rather than forward or to the sides. You can hold it and actually dodge to the left and dodge to the right, but there's not an easy way to dodge forward. So, under normal circumstances, there's not. In the water, things don't act exactly as you might expect them to. And getting the dodge timing down underwater is a little bit trickier. It's one of the reasons why underwater combat is so hard, is because the dodge windows are just different. So a lot of the times you're better off kind of doing hit and run and just actively trying to get completely out of the way rather than even trying to actually actively dodge through the attack. You'll succeed sometimes, and you can master it and get to where you can actually dodge accurately as you would expect, because that's the name of the game in this. If you couldn't do that, then they would have been an abject failure as far as Monster Hunter goes. But it's not that easy. I'm trying to get to where I'm hitting his back to break the shockers, just to go ahead and take them out of commission, because he'll do the shock attack quite a bit more underwater than he does on the land. He also does this thing where when he's dashing, he'll charge himself up with electricity, and he'll electrify as you go. Now, in low rank for this fight, it's not super important to have a whole bunch of null berries, but when you start fighting him in later ranks, you'll actually want to come in to fights like this. Part of your prep for your high rank fights will be to have 10 null berries on monsters that do Thunderblight and monsters that do Dragonblight. The reason being, Thunderblight significantly boosts the amount of damage you take from thunder attacks, and it significantly decreases the threshold needed to stagger your character. So if you have Thunderblight, it's a lot easier for them to get you stunned, and that this game will take advantage of that. They will combo you to death. Even some of the easier monsters will do that. So anytime you're dealing with an electrical monster, be sure to bring in something to deal with Thunderblight, which is especially one of the big ones in this one, which is Zenogre. And anytime you're dealing with something that puts out Dragonblight, which ironically would be Stygian Zenogre, but there's other things that can do Dragonblight. And the reason why Dragonblight's such a big deal is because it nullifies the element on your weapon. So if you're using pure raw, then Dragonblight's not that big a deal. If you're not using pure raw, then you kind of need to get rid of the Dragonblight. And that's why you need to kind of keep a good stock of null berries. When you're doing those fights, you'll want to come in with 10. When you're not doing those fights, drop them out of your bag, because then it leaves more room for gathering extra supplies as you go. Flash bombs become more and more useful as you go, because they're great for knocking the Ians out of the air. So Rathian, Rathalos, or anything else that can fly, you can drop it out of the air generally. Some of them a little bit harder than others, but those are always good options. So what I'm going to do at this point is let this fight, because it's one of the bigger ones, finish playing out, and then I'll see you when it actually finishes naturally. One tip worth directly addressing here. This is the first one where I really use bombs to wake something up that's actually useful. My lance is not a great wake up weapon. If you have, I believe, hammer and greatsword and maybe the wyvern fire blast from gun lance, those are all better means of waking up the monsters. Now, granted, you can do them into some barrel bombs or set up some bombs and then blow them up after you do the hit, but for a good chunk of the weapons, dropping down bombs, especially mega barrel bombs, will be better than just doing a regular hit to wake them up. So try to bring bombs with you anytime you suspect that the monster's actually going to live long enough to go to sleep. Alright, and since that is a little bit past the 45-minute mark, I am going to go ahead and split this into 2 episodes. Promise the second one is going to be recorded immediately. As a matter of fact, this is being recorded as one video, and I'm just splitting them into 2. I'm going to put 24 hours in between them, but by the time you're hearing this part, if you're actually listening this far, you'll probably see it popping up already. Anyway, this is not a bad fight. Don't let anything like this intimidate you in the game. If you've gotten to this point, you've probably got a good handle over how Monster Hunter works in these earlier games. So there's nothing to really be intimidated by, and most of what my videos are going to do is just a little bit of prep work, so sort of homework before you get into those fights. And just remember, as always, if I can beat it, so can you.